Good morning. Does it sound good? Is everyone can hear? Great. Thank you. So I'm going to begin with a little story about one of the monks at Ajahn Brahm's monastery. And Ajahn Brahm is the abbot of a monastery in Western Australia that's kind of remote. And so it's not very easy to get, back and forth to town. And when people need to see the doctor, it's like quite a trek. And, monks don't drive, so it's always not so convenient. And one of the monks was having a lot of dental problems. And, he'd gone back there once to the dentist, and, and again, a different problem started. And, Ajahn Brahm was walking around and at the monastery, and he sees that monk standing by the woodshed with pliers and a bloody tooth. And, and he realizes that he dealt with this problem. And he asks him, how did you do that? How were you able to do that? And the monk said, well, when he had the idea, he was resting in his kuti, and he decided to do this. He asked himself, he had a dull, right at that point the pain was dull. He says, well, does it hurt? I'm, pulling the tooth right this moment. He said, no, doesn't hurt now. So he started walking to the shed, and he asked himself, well, does it hurt now? Nope. And he kept walking to the shed, holds the door open. Nope, doesn't hurt. And then he put the pliers to his tooth, and he asked himself, does it hurt? No. He yanked, and it was, wow, that hurt, and then it was over, and the moral, of course, is the fact that he didn't spend all that time caught in dread and anticipation. How much more suffering do we cause ourselves to avoid that one moment of pain or that very short period of pain? We can spend weeks in that state, some of us, just avoiding that. And I told the story to one of my students, and he came back to me like a couple of months later and said, I just used that when I went to get my blood drawn. He said he used to dread getting his blood drawn for days before. And he said, I just kept asking myself, is it hurting now? No. And, this brings me to the topic of this talk, which is investigation. And that was what he was actually doing, investigating what's happening right now. It's not the imagination of what's, the dread, the fear. What's happening right now, there's no pain. And right now, if we just keep coming back to that, what's happening here? What's happening now? And that's the wisdom that can come from investigation. The Buddha taught that everything we need to learn on the path to freedom can be discovered through our own powers of investigation. Everything. And he basically, what he taught us is to train that ability, to develop that power of investigation that really sees clearly what's happening at any given moment. A lot of us, who grew up with TV shows and things like that, and there are a lot of crime shows, there's always like the investigation, right? And the investigation always in my mind was like, they're trying to solve a crime. But what it has in common with investigation that we use in practice is that in the crime scene, they're looking at the details of the crime scene. What are all the details there? And they're looking for what's out of place, what's something unusual, so they're just noticing everything that there is. And in a very similar way, we do that when we investigate our own minds. We look at the details of our experience. what's really happening here? Not what we want to be happening here, but what's really happening here. And we notice, instead of what's out of place or doesn't belong, we notice what causes us stress, what causes us contraction, what we're pushing away, what we're pulling towards us. So we notice those things. And when we notice those things, it gives us a choice. We can either continue, pushing something away, or we can just look again. Oh, what's happening here? Oh, look, this is how pushing something away feels like. And this is like the power that we develop, the ability to keep seeing what's here. And when stress arises in any form, to make the choice to let go of the stress in whatever way, skillful way we find. Meditation and in insight meditation, mindfulness and an investigation go hand in hand. They work together. Most of the time, when we're applying it, we're not thinking of applying investigation. You're just doing it. And for instance, if one way to think of it is like when we're looking at the breath. Think of it like an apple instead, okay? You're looking at an apple, and it's an apple, you recognize it, and you're paying enough attention that it's an apple in your hand. But if you investigate it, you'll go, wow, that's got a lot of red on this side, some green over here, and wow, this one's kind of a flat-looking apple. I had one of those the other day. It was just the flattest apple I'd ever seen. It was just like kind of squished. And so you see all those little details. Mindfulness just sees that the apple is there. And then you have the quality of the concentration that keeps you paying attention. So you're looking at the apple and suddenly you're somewhere else, right? And concentration says, no, this is the task at hand. Let's look at this apple. And so you've got all these three qualities that are kind of working together. So when we're watching the breath and we're, just knowing we're watching the breath, and then we start fading away and like kind of the mind gets dull, we can apply a little more, oh, what's really happening here? And you start looking at the little details. And there's such a difference in the breath sometimes when you're kind of seeing it like, oh yeah, in, out, 1, 2, or you're like really right there, Sometimes I've used the term caressing the breath. It's like if you're caressing a young child or a dog you love, you're not spaced out, kind of, yeah, I'm caressing the dog, but you're like, enjoying it. There's an engagement in it. And so sometimes, with the breath, I can bring that intimacy with the breath, that really being there with it very closely. And sometimes, it's not that everything we do, all forms of investigation are tiny in detail. Sometimes, it's like looking through a microscope, right? And you have most of you looked through a microscope once? Or seen pictures, and God, it's so alive in there sometimes. There's so much going on. Blood cells, or, I saw vitamin C, in one of those really ultra microscopes, and it looked like this incredible mandala. It was just beautiful. And so, if you look really closely, things open up in a different way. But then at other times, what's useful in practice is to open up the vision, open up your scope of attention, and make it broader. And it's kind of like looking at the night sky, looking at the telescope, through a telescope, right? You see millions of details out there. It's not you're going to focus on all of them, right? That you look at bananas. But you just, getting a fruit salad here, apple, banana. So it gets really big, but within that largeness, we see different kind of details. And, And same thing in meditation, sometimes, like, if the mind's really sluggish, I'm sure all of you have experienced a little bit of that sloth and torpor that happens on occasion, where it just starts drifting, and, paying really close attention can really help, and really noticing those really minute parts of the breath. But if you're really restless mind, it can be really helpful to open up the attention really big, give it room. The image we use sometimes is the image of wild horses. We put them in a corral, and they're really miserable, right? They're just, trying to get out. And you put them in a wide pasture, and they're moving fast and happily, but they're just so beautiful and graceful, and so a fast mind, a busy mind, a restless mind, we don't have to change it. We just have to know, oh, it's a restless, busy mind. We don't have to push it away. We see it, we investigate it. What is it like to have a busy mind? Oh, it's beautiful. It's like wild horses up there. It's like we can allow it to be that way. We can say there's like two aspects to investigation. There's seeing what's there, right? This is a piece of paper. This is a bell. Seeing the details of my environment. When I sat down, I looked really carefully that I didn't sit on anything, especially the microphone. So you see those details. But the other part of investigation in the practice, in the Dharma, is the discernment, the ability to see distinctions between things, right? The details, the distinctions, but to see which ones are helpful in terms of freeing the heart, freeing the mind, and which ones actually aren't helpful. Such as, we're meditating, and suddenly we find ourselves in this wonderful fantasy. I mean, it's really enjoyable. It doesn't seem like it's causing us any dukkha at that moment, any stress. It's just a wonderful fantasy. And the mind goes, oh, I'm just spent a lot of time in my fantasy. I kind of want to go back to it. It was really juicy. But investigation says, is this forward leading to the reason you're actually here? Why are you here? Right? You took this time to meditate, right? You can fantasize anytime. It's not bad. It's not a wrong thing. It just isn't what you're doing. And so it sees, it discerns. That's not helpful for what we're trying to do here, which is train the mind, train the mind. It's not making that wrong. And, that's such an important point, because I know that, how many of you have had a meditation and said, that was a bad sitting? You may not have said it out loud, but, but you've thought that, right? And that piece of unhelpful thinking is a really important piece, because we're not training the mind to stay on the breath. We're not training the mind to stay concentrated. We're training the mind to be free of attachment. That's what we're training the mind. And so sometimes we get stuck and we mistake that. We think that the purpose of the meditation was for it to be a certain way. But the purpose of meditation is to show up enough that we see how we cause our own suffering. And the more clearly we see that, the easier it is to begin to have it fade away and to let go of it. And so when we think that's a bad meditation, that moment is a moment of not seeing clearly. What did we learn? How do we meet or experience when it's not what we want? The other image sometimes I have is that, I'm walking down a path, I'm hiking, and there's the road in the traditional fork in the road, and on the left is the way I always go home. It's the short way, and on the right it's a little bit longer way, so I rarely take it. And as I'm walking, I'm kind of really want to get home already, and so I'm ready to go left. But all of a sudden, because I'm being mindful and investigating, I notice that path is really muddy. It's really muddy right now. And the other path is kind of on the sunny side, and it's pretty dry. And so I make a choice. I'm going to take this side because this is taking me home. This is taking me home in an easier way. It doesn't make the other path bad or wrong or a failure or anything. It's just how it is. Right now, that's not helpful. And so when the torments of the mind rise, right, that we all have these universal things that happen in our minds, where we're contracted and unhappy about our experience. When those things arise, oh, that's what arose. It's not wrong for being there. We investigate it. And that investigation of that is the wholesome factor of mind. We are already transforming it. For instance, if your habit of mind is worrying, right? Some people really worry a lot. They're always worrying about stuff, right? So the moment you see, oh, that's worry, you're no longer worrying. You're now investigating. You've already changed the picture. You've already opened the container up. And this is actually the way to freedom from worry. When we do that, it weakens that habit of worry. Every time it weakens that habit of worry. So when the meditation ends and we're unhappy with what happened, we investigate that unhappiness. Oh, I had an expectation. I didn't get things my way. That's the Dharma, the teachings of the Dharma. Getting what we want. Needing to get what we want, trying to always get what we want is what causes suffering. Life is going to give us at least half of what we don't want. And so really being able to be happy whether we get what we want or we don't get what we want. How we investigate, when we're relaxed and we're paying attention, investigation just shows up. Have you ever had a wonderful conversation with a friend and you're just interested? You're not working at it. You're not doing anything difficult. You're just there. You're enjoying the conversation. You're just interested. And in the same way, if we're interested in the breath and we're noticing the details, we're not working at it. But when we get caught by something, it's very easy to lose that relaxation, right? When we get caught by, let's say, one of my favorite hindrances has always been noise while I'm meditating. That has gotten me caught, a really loud noise. Like we used to live in the desert in this really beautiful, pristine space, 2.5 acres. It was so beautiful and quiet. And all of a sudden at 6:30 in the morning, these young guys in their motorcycles would come through the dirt roads and just circle an area over and over and over again, and I would just, rage would arise. And meditating, yes, rage would arise, and so how do you meet that? How do you meet that? There was the displeasure of the noise, very unpleasant, and it came and went, And then there was the idea that how dare they? They shouldn't be doing this. There's all this extra stuff that came up, all this extra stuff. And I kept, negotiating in my mind, how do I fix it, get a water pistol, all sorts of creative ideas, right? What's really important is what do we do in our own heart? How do we meet those things in our own heart? I remember being really impressed when I heard that, I think Bernie Glassman, I think was his name, was a Zen teacher. He held these 10-day retreats under a bridge, under a very busy bridge where cars were going, freeway bridge. And everybody who took the retreat was supposed to have no money, no possessions, and just come as they are, and just to live there that way with nothing, and for 10 days, and that's really the practice of letting go, of really, okay, can we be at peace in ourselves when we're not getting what we want? When things aren't the way we want them to be, including our mind state. And that's the real key thing here, is to be okay even when our mind state isn't okay. And so, for instance, when I was like very, very angry and uptight, and I go, I'm meditating, right? Yeah, I'm going to do some loving kindness towards those assholes. That was the state of my mind, and then, it finally arose the memory of Ajahn Sumedho talking about affectionate curiosity, and that's how he likes to describe curiosity, the quality of mind that's affectionate. It's not curiosity for curiosity's sake, it's a friendly curiosity. And so I turned the affectionate curiosity towards my anger and turmoil, and really saw that pain in myself. How much worse it was than that unpleasant noise. God, it was so much worse than that unpleasant noise. So I was able to really apply that, that kind, it's a little bit, when our mind's having a tantrum, not different than when a 4-year-old's having a tantrum, right? It's pretty similar, a lot of that, I didn't get my ice cream and the whole world's falling down on my head because I didn't get my ice cream. It's really serious matter, to that 4-year-old. And so that's what our mind's doing. It's having a tantrum, right? And so with a child, you kind of smile and you go, oh, this sweet, affectionate, oh, look at how they're doing that. Let me just support them while they have their tantrum, and it'll be over. And again, we can do that with our own mind. We can do that with ourselves. Wherever we find contraction, we can bring kindness. Investigation gives us that choice. Investigation shows us we're not trapped in that turmoil. That we have a choice to be mindful, to see what's here, and to let go of what we can let go. Not to force ourselves to let go, but to let go of what lets go. Relax into the turmoil. Allow it to move through us. Every form of turmoil, every emotion, every contraction comes and goes eventually. One of the things that we often forget is that we actually can choose what thoughts we're going to have in some way by just by changing what we're paying attention to, what the focus of our attention is. For instance, if let's say we're in the car. I saw these potholes here, so this is appropriate in my mind. So, and we find we got a flat tire, and so we get out of the car, and we've done everything we need to do. We call work. We say we're going to be late, and we call AAA to help us, come and change our tire. And then we just have to wait, right? And a day like today, it's and we can sit there, and and our mind can just be focused on, oh God, I'm going to be late. I'm going to have all this work to do. Da, 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 all the stuff that goes on through mind that's worried and having an unpleasant experience, right? Or we can actually shift our attention to what's here. Oh, it's a beautiful day, beautiful sky. And it's the same thing we do in our meditation, right? We're caught up in worry. We don't have to keep, kind of scratching at that scab. It's like, the worry, that cycle of worry, or cycle of planning, where we're just, massaging it to death, And so we can just shift the attention to, oh, look to a little bigger point of view, watching it. It's like, oh, look at that worry going on, see what's happening. Look at how the body feels with that worry. I'm not relaxed. Can I relax into it and allow the worry, not make it wrong, not, oh, we got to go away. No, we just allow it to be there until it goes away. It will go away on its own when we give it room, when we give it space, and when we give it curiosity. When we're caught in something, sometimes, when things are simple in meditation, it's very simple to investigate. But sometimes when the mind is caught in a hindrance and it feels like very complicated, and so one of the ways that I investigate, since it just feels like too confusing to know, what do I investigate here? What do I pay attention to? There's so much chaos going on in my mind. And so I look to the body first, how's the body? Is the body relaxed here? Because we don't have contracted states in the mind without something contracting in the body. And then I might notice, then I go to the heart, to the emotional state. How are my emotions right now? And that's where I notice, I might notice I'm unhappy with what's happening. This is just such a, terrible meditation. I'm a terrible meditator, and that's more the cognitive side, because these ideas, if I was a good meditator, this wouldn't be happening, right? I wouldn't be here. If I was a mature person, I wouldn't be having these immature thoughts. If I was, all these ideas that we have in our minds. So we notice how we feel about things. Maybe there's fear going on. Maybe there's sadness going on. Maybe we're lonely. All these different things that human beings can experience. So look to the body, to the feelings, to the thoughts about how we are. And we also can look to our motivation. It's obvious the body, heart, and mind, those are the things that are there all the time. But our motivation is something that can get away from us. That can go unseen. And really this is, in some ways, it's like right at the heart of the practice. Are we wanting, or are we wanting to push something away? And that sometimes is just, that all our miseries, I want something. I want a better meditation. I want it to be more fulfilling. I want. And then moving forward doesn't allow us to see what's here, to be with this. Or you don't like what what you're feeling, you want to push it away. Wanting it to go away, wanting things to change. Neither. It's funny, in some ways it's exactly the same thing. Not wanting things the way they are. Wanting them to be different. But sometimes we experience it as wanting to have something else. And sometimes we experience it as wanting to push away what's there. And so however you feel it in the moment, what your experience is in the moment. And, and I'll just say a general rule that I really appreciate, when I heard this many years ago, if we're struggling, anytime we're struggling, something is being left out of our attention. It's kind of an interesting thought if you really bring that to heart. Whenever we're struggling, even when we're struggling doing something physical, it may be, for instance, I remember when I was learning to use a hammer, and I just kept trying to control the experience, right? To get it just right, and it felt like a struggle, and it really took convincing for me to let go, and it's not that I didn't miss, I missed plenty, but the trust to let go, and at that point, I stopped struggling to try to get it right, and that made all the difference in the world. Stopping the struggle. So anytime we're struggling in our own minds and our own hearts, there's something we're not seeing. It may be difficult. Whatever we need to do, it might be difficult. But there's a difference between doing something difficult, like climbing a mountain where it's really, steep and you've been going for an hour and your legs are really tired. It's difficult. But you don't have to struggle. It's just difficult. It's just unpleasant. Might be very unpleasant, but we don't have to struggle with it. We don't have to add all this other stuff. And so if we're struggling, what are we not seeing? Aversion, right? We don't like the fact that it's hard. And we're adding that to our experience of difficulty, which is a burden actually. If we're just with the difficult, it's not as hard as if we're with the difficult and then with the attitude that it shouldn't be this way. That adds a lot of extra. The investigation in the deeper practices of meditation, it's called the tool for wisdom. Dhammavichaya. It's the wisdom that arises from this. And this really points to the discerning aspect of investigation, the part that sees what's helpful, what's forward-leading, and what's not helpful. And this is insight meditation. And at every level of practice, we have different types of insights that arise. When we're sometimes listening to Dharma talk, we can have very, very wonderful insights. Sometimes the teacher says something and it really resonates with us. I'm sure if all of you have been coming regularly, it's one of the things that brings you back is there's so much resonates with something inside you that knows a lot. The Dharma is true. This stuff is true. It works. And then there's this, we investigate maybe while we're meditating, and all these, the mind is having trouble stabilizing, and we have the understanding that in investigation that if we just really pay attention to the breath, the mind eventually calms. Yeah, it does actually calm. And at some point it becomes really something we understand. It's an insight into the way our mind works. And also at other times, and our personal stories show up. And, I'll give you an example of, like, for me, one of the things that happened to me, I noticed on retreat, I was meditating, and I would notice that there was just something wasn't quite right, It's like I was staying on the breath, I was calm, but there was just like this overall tone in my mind that was just slightly off, and I just couldn't pinpoint it, but I just kept practicing, and looking more carefully. And what I noticed is that every time my mind drifted, when it came back, I'd feel like I had failed, for having gone away. And that habit of thinking that every time my mind drifted, I had failed was so strong in me. I watched it time after time. Even while I'm watching it, it's like going, it's doing it again. Wow. That sinking feeling of failure, that sinking feeling of failure. And so I watched it for a really long time as it slowly got a little bit less. And I wasn't drifting that much. It was interesting because it was on a daily meditation, I would have thought I was doing really well. But on retreat, I'm expecting it to be much less drifting, and expectation, of course. And so, and as I started seeing it more and more carefully, I started getting more affectionate to it, more soft with it, and as it finally just kind of faded, so that doesn't arise anymore for me. But things like that don't necessarily go away with one time of seeing them. I mean, I don't want to give you that false idea. Some things do, but a lot of things, it takes years sometimes for some of those things to be let go of, And I've learned not to, I've learned to accept what lets go and accept what doesn't let go yet. That's been a big part of my practice, is seeing that the things we're still holding on to are there, and it's part of the wisdom we have. And often we have what I call personal insights, and I've mentioned, the mind can have repetitive patterns, that whenever the mind isn't focusing on something, it has a fallback, right? And for some people, that fallback might be planning. How many of you did some planning while you were meditating, right? It's, this is what I'm going to do later, okay. But most of the planning we do in meditation is actually often not useful planning. It's often just compulsive planning that isn't particularly helpful. And these are personal insights when we see this inside ourselves. And again, we don't force ourselves to stop planning, but we see what's driving that planning. What's driving that? For myself, because I'm a really good planner. I mean, it's a skill, and it was always my tendency to do this in meditation too. But part of planning for me was enjoyable. I like planning. It's fun. But when it's fun, I feel happy. It's like, oh, let's plan this project together. It's always fun and exciting. But often I'd find the planning in meditation was not that kind of planning, it was the other kind. And it would be this kind of contracted, we're having friends over for dinner, I'm going to make blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe I'll make this. Maybe I'll sit this person over here. Maybe I'll do this, And just these kind of, unhelpful things that arise from this anxiety or worry underneath, and as we get curious about it, we don't need to shove it away and go back to the breath. We just get curious about it and we notice, oh, this is how worry feels, that anxiety feels in my body. This is what's here. Oh, okay, I can relax into it. I can allow that. I don't have to fight it, and it will go away. It will just move away, will change. Everything changes, right? Including worry and planning. And we allow it, and as we return without that have been wrong, that having been something that we blew. It's just, oh, back home, welcome home, nice to be back. And so we're developing a wholesome attitude in our entire meditation. In the times when things arise that are contracted and difficult, and in the times when things feel like they're wonderful. It's a wholesome attitude of mind, of heart. And when the awakening factor of investigation is really well established, and this is where retreat practice can really help take us much deeper into this. And we can see, we start seeing, investigating much subtler levels of reality. So instead of noticing kind of the grossness of, oh, my stomach feels tight, not gross, but there's so much more subtleness we start experiencing, and we start seeing that everything on a very deep level arises and passes away. We all know intellectually that everything's impermanent, right? Nobody would argue with that, that everything is impermanent. And everything goes away. There's nothing we'll ever be able to keep. So intellectually we realize that if everything's going away, nothing can make us permanently happy, right? As we practice in the deeper levels of practice, we start seeing that kind of in a bone deep level it's just so much deeper that it's not in the intellect, it's nonverbal. It's a nonverbal knowing that nothing out there is going to satisfy. That there's nowhere out there to look for the satisfaction. There's nothing in here to look for satisfaction. And it's a letting go. It's a letting go, a deeper and deeper letting go. And that's why investigation is the tool of wisdom, because it brings us to the realization, which is not an intellectual realization, that there's nothing worth holding on to. There's nothing worth grabbing onto, grasping. And that freedom that comes from that is what allows a very deep peace. And we can touch on that at times, and we can live with it at times. And sometimes it just arises for little pieces here and there. But however it is, this is the path of practice. This is where the practice takes us, to the point of, not grabbing onto anything, to these fleeting lives, these fleeting bodies, everything in life, the trees, the beautiful trees. And so it calls us to just be here with what's here. Our lives here, not in the future when we become good meditators. It's kind of this beautiful balance in the practice between being fully here and yet being on a path that's forward-leading. Stepping here, but yet also knowing that we're forward-leading, developing our minds, developing in the direction of freedom. So I'm going to just end with a very short quote by Ajahn Chah. Peace within us is to be found in the same place as agitation and suffering. It's not found in a forest or a hilltop, nor is it given by a teacher. Where you experience suffering, you can also find freedom from suffering. Trying to run away from suffering is actually running towards it. So thank you all.